Welcome to Soundbite, the podcast where we talk about the topics that are on people's minds in New Brunswick and Canada and learn more about the experts on those topics. I'm Caitlin Dutt, one of your co-hosts.
And I'm Tim Porter. Today we have Wayne Knorr joining us. And Wayne, by way of introduction, Wayne recently retired from a very long career at the City of Fredericton. He worked in both tourism and communications over 3+ decades, and he was also very recently the national president of the Canadian Public Relations Society, which is a great achievement. So, Wayne, I kind of glossed over your whole career there. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got that. As I said, I did about a decade in tourism for the City of Fredericton, and my responsibility primarily there was meeting convention sales. My job was to visit national associations across the country and convince them to bring their events here. That was long before we had a convention center, by the way, so we were promoting hotels and stuff like that. Yeah. And then I switched over to really start up the communications office for the City of Fredericton. And some almost 24 years later, I walked out the door as a retired civil servant.
So highlights or achievements?
Highlights or achievements? Yes. From a tourism perspective, it was just great to be able to promote Fredericton, and that's where I sort of learned, and cut my teeth on what makes Fredericton a great and special place to live. From a communications perspective, we were talking about this before the podcast started, but really, there had been no formal office. Tourism had sort of done some of that promotion for Fredericton and helped out with various areas of communication, I guess you would say. So the office was formalized, and I was the sole practitioner there for a number of years. And slowly over time, we added in staff and, to help tell the story and promote the activities that were being carried out by council. When I was done, basically it had come down to the fact that we had myself as a manager, we had someone else focusing on some of the strategic communications and some of the council issues, 3 staff and a couple of students, and at any given time, half a dozen freelancers helping us tell the story of the City of Fredericton. To put that in a little bit of context, from my early days at the city, we were there, we were telling stories, we were putting together news releases. As I said earlier, those things got faxed out to the media. And some of our listeners may not even realize what a fax machine is. Then over time, I was there during the introduction of social media. There was this great sense that somehow social media would be the thing that we didn't need any more staff. We had capped ourselves, and that you didn't need to do anything more than just have that conversation going on. And very quickly, you realized that you had to package information. You had to make it clear and concise. You had to understand who your audience was, and what they wanted to hear. And as I said, by the time I got to the end of my career, we were very much trying to use that two-way communications maxim, that is communications, really working on engagement, listening to the public, understanding, building their discussions and thoughts into the communications process, and really looking at our analytics to understand what was working and what wasn't. So
you were able to work on a few notable crises in our city.
It's really interesting from a crisis communications perspective. It's almost a beast unto itself, and really, we always, despite all the sort of noise and things that might be going on, whether it was internal or with the public, when that river started to rise, you could really see the machine go to work at the City of Fredericton. You saw the departments really working together. Mm-hmm. They knew their roles. I mean, over time, you got to understand what a certain river level meant to the city, what started to shut down. And our job as communicators was really to make sure that the public understood that as well, right? Avoid this street, this area is closed, and depending on the height of the water, it was then to convince the public to avoid perhaps the downtown or a certain area, leave their car in a certain place if they could, and, walk into their work, take the bus and that kind of stuff. And of course, always, it was really an understanding of what to do with the residents who were affected, and to make sure that they were being safely taken out of a situation that was bad. And and protect them to the extent that we could as, their lives. What people may not understand as well, was that it wasn't just city staff. We had a network of probably, I don't know, I'm going to say 20, 30 community organizations that were helping out. I mean, we evacuated certain places. The Canadian Red Cross was instrumental in that. We're up at the campus at the University of New Brunswick, so we were housing people in the residences that were being evacuated. There was just a number of things that needed to be done, and it was taking care of the residents. It was taking care of the first responders who were out there on the front lines. And again, as I said, in all of that time communications, what was the most current information, keeping council informed, that was a key part of that. And to this day, I watch what's going on. Where obviously I'm paying attention to what's going on in Saskatchewan and Manitoba right now, and listening to those folks being evacuated. So
yeah, I mean, we're obviously facing more natural disasters as, climate change impacts our weather. We see forest fires. Luckily, New Brunswick, or at least like the Fredericton area, is not so much impacted by that. But in 2018 and 2019, back to back, we had both like record level flood numbers, or flood levels. And so like from a crisis comms perspective, you went back to back crises. What was the most challenging part for you? Was it to get the information out? Was it, I don't know. What was it?
That's an interesting question. Was it challenging the information out? No. I guess what the public may need to understand is that we operated in something called an EOC, an Emergency Operations Center. And our day started and perhaps a midday meeting and a day ended in that EOC. That's where we brought in the various departments who were responding to the crisis that was at hand. We brought in the various agencies that might be helping out. It was where we got the most current and up-to-date information of what was going on. So from a communications perspective, the information flowed. It gave us that point in time. Now, it's not to say that there weren't surprises in there. The water was expected to get to this level, and all of a sudden it was at this level. And we rose to that occasion, right? We invited the media in to focus on that. The challenge, was really remembering that there were people involved. We were safely ensconced in, at the Two Nations Crossing fire station, high above any water level. The generator kicked in if the power went out for us, which was important in regards to feeding the information and setting up the information. There's humans involved. And certainly you hear the stories. You know that people are affected, and you're compassionate to help when you can, and you also need to keep pushing through to make sure that the majority of people are, taken care of, and that you're doing what you can as a municipality, as a provincial government, as a federal government, in response to some crisis like that.
So I recall, Wayne, a couple of times working with you on royal visits and that sort of thing. So those must have been highlights for you in terms of looking at logistics and protocol.
Right. So it was interesting. Protocol was part of my role at the City of Fredericton. Primarily just, I guess, because I sort of like to do it. When you have that opportunity to host a member of the royal family or a VIP, I worked on Governor General's visits. We routinely would welcome the Lieutenant Governor to council chambers and things like that. You're doing your best. You're understanding the protocol. It gives you something that's greater than yourself when you've got those folks in, and you come very quickly to realize that they represent what is the best and the good of the country or of the province that they represent, or the Commonwealth in that perspective. It's really important that you pay attention to details and logistics. You're working months out in regards to that, you don't need surprises. So things are timed very tightly, and it's the logistics that really are important in regards to making one of those events go well and look flawless at the end of the day, and then you sort of do your debrief afterwards to see what happened. But yeah, I've worked on royal visits of the Queen, couple of the Governor General's visits that were here, and it's not just us alone. We work with other protocol folks from either the province or from the person that is arriving for a visit.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as a myself, a younger communications person and practitioner, it's cool to see you talk about, you talked about earlier, the fax machines, putting up faxes at the beginning, and then your office slowly built itself up into, I don't know how many people it was.
It was roughly myself and 3 full-time, 2 students when I left.
Yeah. So much bigger than when it started. And, you have the introduction of social media, and that was a big deal for communications at the time. And now we're facing something which almost seems greater than ourselves, AI.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think that might impact the PR profession. And if, you can almost, I don't know if there's been times in your career where you thought that something might change communications forever, if that was, the advent of social media or not, and if you think that there are any lessons to maybe help us get through this or help us adapt to this incoming.
Yeah. What's next?
Yeah, transformation. Yeah.
Well, what your listeners probably can't see is a lot of gray hair and a gray mustache, so I've been around for a while. Have I ever thought that anything is going to change communications? Maybe early on, but not so much now.
Yeah.
I think the role of communicators is to be able to adapt, is to be able to take advantage of the new tool that comes along. What communicators need to do is actually learn to capitalize on that and use that to the good of the communications and public relations, ensuring that they're getting their message out, that they're communicating, using it to communicate factual information to their audiences, whoever that is, whether it's the youth, whether it's seniors, whether it's someone in between. My thoughts on AI, it was a little bit of something that was being used as I was leaving. Something I've done a little bit, use it for summaries in my freelance work that I do now. I don't use it to the fullest extent of what's going on. I would say that the Canadian Public Relations Society is right now, the focus is on AI and what does it mean. And again, we do hear, AI is, are you using it for is the good, or are you using it for bad? It's really interesting to imagine that with a few parameters, and we've seen this where, you can produce the front page of a newsletter or of a newspaper, which is amazing to think about that. But I add in the word human curation into that process. At this point in time, the advice that we've been given from a Canadian Public Relations Society is that it's not going to replace jobs in a great way. You still need that human curation. You still need to be able to connect the dots and understand, and there's context, right? Yeah. So as a communicator who was involved in council meetings, both open and closed, who was involved in early discussions with departments about changes that were coming in a particular area, you have that knowledge and that information that a true, from what I'm seeing, and I'm sure that your listeners may call me out on this, but I'm seeing it as what I use it for now is a summary. So can you take that? I'm sure over time you'll be able to take that knowledge and that learning, but a human is providing parameters in some cases for what you need to do. There's a project I'm involved in with the Canadian Public Relations Society where we're going to try to use AI to do some summaries of various work that's being done by chapters across the country, right? But we're giving it the parameters, right? Is it going to change communications? Yes. Am I scared of it? No. I think what we need to do as professional communicators is be sure that we learn these tools and we understand how to use them. And then again, we go back to the basics, which is, making sure that we're communicating factual information, a decision, understanding what the audience needs to hear, and doing the basics of communications.
Yeah, I think what you said about, that human touch, the necessity to review the AI before it goes out and make sure it's all factual. Like, I think that there's some truth to that. I mean, just giving an example from even like our own office place at Porter O'Brien, it's funny because one of my colleagues had used AI to kind of collect a bunch of data and put it in a table. Right. And like we got someone to fact check it, and we suspected that it would be all good. Maybe there'd be like one error. Turned out the table completely wrong. Right. Yeah. And so I think that just opened our eyes to, AI is great and it can be done to expedite a lot of tasks and make you work faster and potentially better. But there's also the warning that it comes with, like it doesn't replace people, at least yet.
At least yet. I know one colleague had talked about the fact that they used AI to sort of summarize, they look back over a number of years and their announcements and things that were going on, right, to understand what they had done in this particular area, that particular area. That was a very task-driven type search. But yeah, if you're presented with understanding the concerns of a citizen and what you've got to do and how your decision is going to impact them or what they really need in a decision that's being made, there's a bit of different. I'm not saying that AI won't get there. I'm just saying that right now, human curation is key to those things. There's that human understanding and connecting the dots over a long period of time that helps make your communication outcome better.
Yeah. For sure.
So Wayne, why don't you tell us a little bit about your time leading the Canadian Public Relations Society?
Right. So I actually, even in my tourism days, many years ago now, I was exposed to the Canadian Public Relations Society. Basically, it is the National Association for Communicators and Public Relations folks from across Canada, and we are part of a network of communications associations around the world. This is not just unique to Canada, and we work with those partners. So I very soon after becoming communications coordinator at the city, I joined formally as a member, and over the last 25 years, I've been involved. Early on, it really was connecting to that community, and it was, again, there's nothing quite like having that connection with someone who understands the issue you're dealing with, and whether you're a doctor, you're an engineer, you're a city manager, or anything like that. It's that opportunity to connect with someone who understands and live that life. I credit a lot of my learning over time. I'm an English major with some business courses, but I credit that involvement with the Canadian Public Relations Society with my professional development. And in fact, through that process, I actually earned my designation, which is APR, Accredited in Public Relations, which was like a 1-year, very intensive thing where you presented a work sample, showed that you understood how to communicate. And of course, communications folks listening may know the acronym RACE, Research, Analyze, Communicate, Evaluate. That's the basis of communications that we use. And then you did a study period, you did a written exam and an oral exam, and you pass that, and you get to use the designation APR. So that was my communications courses and university training, I guess, if you want to go with that. Then I had the opportunity to become part of the national board for the Canadian Public Relations Society. And again, there are 13 societies across the country, local chapters doing good stuff locally. And as a Canadian association, we looked at that broad spectrum, that pan-Canadian look at issues that were being faced and dealt with by communicators across the country and what was common. And I'll give you examples. We just talked about AI. That's pan-Canadian. That's a world issue, right? Mm-hmm. We looked at DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the changing face of what communicators look like. 70% of the profession is female, but more importantly, we're starting to see all kinds of different people becoming involved in communications and public relations. And we're communicating to a very diverse audience now. So you need that understanding and that learning that helps you improve your communications. But anyway, on the board, I was very fortunate to be involved in a number of things, looking at shared resources across associations and deal with some of these issues that I talked about, DEI primarily during my time. And as time went along, I became treasurer, vice president of the association, and I served as national president from 2020 to 2021. Those of you who might have
chaotic
forgotten,
time.
chaotic time, you will check your calendar to find out that was COVID. And so I had the, I guess, unique opportunity to be a virtual president. We never had a national conference. We never connected in person.
Pros and cons.
Yeah, there's pros and cons. It was an opportunity to learn from that. I mean, but again, it is like family when you get together, right? It is that opportunity to greet your folks across the thing. And so as an association, we do national awards program. We do that training. We work on thought leadership. And I'm still involved, even though I'm a past president. I'm involved in two aspects now of the association, which is the governance committee. I'm a member of the CPRS National Governance Committee. And we look at the bylaws and regulations, boring stuff perhaps to some, but important when you're dealing with certain issues. And I am a member of the Canadian CPRS, Canadian Public Relations Society Foundation, again, focused on thought leadership and scholarships that help young emerging folks who want to, who study communications and may not have the means to do that. So that's the two things I'm involved in to this point.
So you do. Obviously, you're very involved with CPRS, and we were talking even before the recording of this podcast about one of the great challenges of communications these days is polarization and pluralism.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about in the past 5 years how that's evolved, how communicators can kind of get past what seems like an impassable block to convince people that, either the city's doing good.
Yeah, to get past. That's interesting. It is, the diminishing local media market, the ability of everyone to say whatever they feel they should be saying. Yeah, so pluralism is basically that look at both sides. There's the yes and the no, and they become very entrenched sometimes. And it seems like in the past we would have had a dialogue and a debate to come to find the center ground, the area that was good for the majority. I mean, municipal government, local government is closest to the public. That's, it's very grassroots. And again, we are the closest to the residents on the street because they're driving down the streets and we're creating the parks. So we're just, from that discussion, it has been difficult, and it seems like, social media has been able to fuel that two sides, and, you're delivered the side you want to hear, and we don't have those debates anymore, which is unfortunate. So again, this is just an area where Canadian Public Relations Society is starting to look at, but we're not the only ones. I mean, government's considering it. I know the Obama Foundation is looking at that whole issue and having those discussions, right? And really looking at how do you have a civilized debate because decisions are not made in a vacuum, and every side has some aspect, I think, that is correct. But at the end of the day, how do you meet in the middle and make decisions that are best for youth or best for seniors or best for persons with disabilities, and decisions that reflect a changing demographic and a multicultural look of our country. I'm going really high level here. That's very aspirational for a guy from Hoyt, New Brunswick, which is just a little community not that far from here, who worked in a municipal government. But that is an interesting discussion for us to have. So,
talking about what we just talked about, you can really see it at the municipal level. You can see these councils. There's councillors resigning. There's mayors resigning, and
there's been a real shakeup also in municipalities in the last little while, in New Brunswick and maybe further afield. But there's been a lot of more pressure on them to take on social issues and everything else. The social issues, right. So I will preface by saying I'm not in government anymore. I mean, this is my look back over time. I've seen many charts produced over time, which shows the responsibility of the federal government, the provincial government, the municipal government. Again, because Canadians and because we're such travel, and we've got people moving in and out, the responsibilities of local government in the province change depending on the province that you're in. And it is difficult
to say, well, that's not my area when, your resident is experiencing something that perhaps is an issue for provincial and federal governments to look at. I think what we're hearing is that all levels of government are talking about how they need to work together, and it's very difficult. I mean, I've had 30 years experience in regards to working in local government. So you go back to a fairly large municipal government, right? I mean,
getting bigger.
And getting bigger, right, as the amalgamation, right? I've learned over time that amalgamation is never meant to take people's history away from them. I mean, you look at the ways that people, a community is a community, and that little bit of that those important stories that are part of those communities remain. What government's responsibility is to deliver services across the spectrum. And one of the things I would talk about is, does it really matter in the morning if you've got to get out the door who plowed that road or street in front of your house? What's important is that it was plowed. Was the ice, sanded or salted based on that, right? So, the challenge is understanding that at the highest level, there are some common services that every resident should expect. And, and how does a government deliver those in a cost-effective way, being aware of the fact that residents are paying for these, right? So those are, I think one of the discussion is bubbling up to saying what's common in some of these discussions, and how do you work together as a group to deliver those common things, and how do we as communicators ensure that people understand where to get the information they need about their municipality, right? And how do we communicate that information to those residents, right? It's tough. I get it, but again, it's never meant to replace those local stories and those little areas where there's great things. But is your park mowed? Is your playground equipment safe? Is your street plowed? Is the water being drained away, the runoff water being drained away from your property so it doesn't harm your property? A ditch is similar to what a curb and gutter is. Those are the discussions, right? And how do you do that in a cost-effective way? And how does everybody share a little bit in regards to paying for those things and making sure that your tax dollars that you do pay are being used wisely?
Yeah.
So, Wayne, it might surprise people to know there's actually credentials in this profession of public relations. Tell us a little bit about that through the credentialing program that you're involved in.
Right. So we were talking about the fact that I have an APR, and that was a study program, and looking at, the work sample that you do, the studying people who've written about communications and the way to do communications, and again examine in the oral interview that I did. But again, one of the things that I guess that maybe people don't quite understand is the fact that that brochure that arrives at your door, or that message that you might hear on the radio, or something that you might see on the side of a bus, really are not just things that people think are pretty and that just, they got a nice picture and you give a few words. Communicators are really looking to understand the decision that's being made, looking to understand the issues that the public are having or that a person is having, and making sure that the communication resonates with them. We often say that sometimes we want to make the phone ring because there's a particular reason why we need to be talking to a particular audience, or we sometimes want to make sure that we've communicated the right information so that the phone doesn't ring, so that people are getting the information and not, tying up phone lines, or just so they know what they can do, right? Fredericton really, two sides of the river, various neighborhoods with a growing population. You want to make sure that the messaging or the issue that's being dealt with is communicated to the right people. And we were talking about this a little bit before, something that might be affecting the people who live over in Silverwood and that area may actually have no relevance to the people who live in St. Mary's, right? And that's the breadth and the focus of what goes on. So you don't want to waste resources by trying to communicate a message to every citizen of the city when an action's needed in a particular area of the city. From our water and sewer perspective, that was one of the files I dealt with, and we talked about this many times from a communications perspective at the city. But it's flushable wipes. They clog your own sewer pipes at your home. They clog municipal sewer lines. They're just not good. Don't flush them.
Part of me still is like, I'm still so surprised that that's an issue.
That's an issue, and that's an issue, right?
Yeah.
It is an issue, and when it blocks, the sewer lines and things start backing up into your home, right? They catch up in screens that are installed in the sewage lift stations, and it costs millions of dollars to put some of these things into place, right?
Yeah.
If there are simple things you can do, and it may only be one particular area that's going on. So again, working with that, I think I mentioned earlier in the podcast the RACE formula: research, analyze, communicate, evaluate. Mm-hmm. So really, what you're trying to do is look at what are other municipalities or other areas doing in a particular situation, understanding that a decision made in one community may not actually be a decision that works for you in your community, and understanding the nuance and the differences of your system. Then you want to make sure that you're communicating that you've communicated to the right audience using the right tactics. And you want to go back and evaluate, right? If your goal was to make the phone ring more, did the phone ring more? It was your goal to get more people to sign up for something online. Did you make that happen? Did people know that there was a grant for this particular thing? Did they sign up and take advantage of that? Mm-hmm. So that's the full circle, and it repeats itself. And there's many of those plan, do, act, plan, do, check, act. There's many of those little circular things that you use. Again, so communication is not just about making something look pretty. Again, even we as communicators would analyze that the photo is the right photo for something that's going on. And then the other thing that we as professional communicators do is, and people may not quite understand this, but as someone with an APR, I adhere to a code of professional standards. And one of those things is that I will not knowingly lie in regards to my communication. And there's any number of things in there. A number of other resources that we have. There's an ethics tree. You work your way through a decision-making process. Many people have seen those little charts, right? But you want to make sure that you're doing things in an ethical manner. Oftentimes, people may not understand that in regards to the work that we do as professional communicators, right?
And that's part of the element of trust that you're agreeing to with the public.
That's right. There is a contract of trust. You need to be right. There's the ethics. There's the trust. There is a goal. I would often sort of say that I had lots to do during the course of the day as regard to making up stuff. As a municipal government, that delivered during my time there 60 plus services to our residents. There was always lots going on. From plowing roads in the winter and making sure people knew what was going on, keeping them informed about things going on in the downtown when we were doing the snow removal in the downtown, how things worked, who you could call if you had a problem, our recreation programs, our tourism programs, and then when bad things happened, how were we involved in regards to crisis communications and making sure the residents stayed safe.
There was an interesting dynamic that we saw demonstrated during the pandemic with the public wanting very factual communication and accurate information. But it was being delivered often by politicians and that sort of thing. And it had a bit of a political spin to it, particularly as we came into the coming out of the pandemic and how we responded to it and the reopenings and that sort of thing. How did you view all that?
Well, there is from a communications perspective, there is a hierarchy of people that we need to be putting in front of cameras and in front of microphones when we're talking, right? Politicians obviously are concerned about certain things. The pandemic, you would have saw a huge rise in the shop local idea, and being safe and assuring people we were doing our best to take care of, playground equipment and keep it sanitized and just all that kind of stuff, reinforcing messages that would have come out of the provincial and federal government. The other thing that is important when you're communicating a message, and even our mayor and council is very good at this time. Very good at this. There was a time when you needed to put the police chief or the fire chief. You need to put that uniform in front of the camera because they instilled that confidence. And there was other times when staff could simply be providing the information, factual, right? So that is the challenge of who's the right person, what's the right issue, making sure that people understand that they're doing enough in regards to listening to their concerns and taking care of those. And it really is up to who's the best person to put in front of the camera. Certainly there are staff experts who can talk ad nauseum about sewer pipes and you may see and I think very fondly of a couple of people I know at the city who know those things intimately, and sometimes that's the message that's needed. And sometimes there's a policy decision that needs to be talked about, and finding the right person who can be in front of the camera, in front of the microphone talking. That's the thing that we need to be focused on.
So just to put a cap on it, a 30-plus year career in the city of Fredericton, you probably worked with a lot of high-profile mayors over that period of time.
Yeah, I forgot to actually check my list of the mayors I work with. And each had their own skill set. Each needed different things provided for them. Some were very good with a few notes and away they went.
Right.
Some needed a bit more structure. All were great people. All were great leaders, and all were the people that I think we needed at the time here at the City of Fredericton.
Yeah. Do you stay in touch with any?
It's always great for me. I've gone to a few State of the City addresses, and probably my favorite table is to stop by and talk to the former mayor's table. They're often the sponsor
that
table.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it's great to see those folks and talk to them about their time. And I always remember. I think I can tell this story with confidence. And Deputy Mayor Brown, who became Mayor Brown, and for a brief time,
Walter Brown.
Yeah. He was great. He no nonsense kind of guy, and he was always teasing me about anything that was holding me back from the city of Fredericton. But then he found out I lived on the north side, so I wasn't a bad guy after that. Right?
He's a Marysville guy.
He was a Marysville guy.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, that's interesting for us. We have two sides of the river.
Yeah.
Our decisions, again, as I said, finding the right audience and talking about decisions that affect one particular part of the city. But oftentimes there were decisions that was made for the whole city. In some ways, the bridges were really the streets for us. The river was non-existent. It was there, obviously, and we knew about that in the spring. But the real challenge, most of the times when we were communicating messages, again, the bridges were just like streets, and that didn't really mean anything more except if the bridge was down for some reason.
Or construction season.
Or construction season. Yeah, construction season. That's construction season.
Yeah. I'm sure you've had your fair share of communication experience with that.
Yeah. And again, the challenge is
the
to
politics of potholes.
The politics of potholes. But to keep a city running, you need to invest in your infrastructure, right? You need to make sure that things are there, and the balance we have as a growing city is taking care of the infrastructure that's there and that's in the ground that's going to be able to adapt to. We talked a little bit about this early on about the climate. What you would build today is certainly not what was being built early on in my career at the City of Fredericton. Mm-hmm. You're looking at 1 in 100 year events that are much more frequent. You're building oversized pipes. And that infrastructure, that construction that's being done now is really looking at the layers, what's under the ground, what's on top of the ground, building it holistically, and talking with other partners to make sure that you're doing the best. It is frustrating, I know that, but I also know that if you don't do this stuff, you're going to have a lot more problems down the road in regards to getting around and having reliable water and sewer in the city.
Yeah, well, municipalities really are the foundational blocks of our communities. And you as a communicator as a former communicator of the City of Fredericton, you're doing good work. So I think that's about all the time that we have.
Thanks for coming in and doing overtime with us.
The extended edition of the podcast, exclusive to Spotify.
Well, once you're salaried as an employee, you put in the time you need to put in.
Okay.
To make sure things get taken care of.
All right. Exactly. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Wayne.
It's great.
You've been listening to Soundbite, a production of Porter O'Brien and 97.9 CHSR. Thanks to CHSR, our podcast host, and March Rojas Velasquez, our podcast editor. You can find episodes on Spotify every Friday.